In the seething chaos of the Immaterium, Khorne stands as a monument of war, hatred, and the primal thirst for blood. Its domain is not bound by nuance or subtlety. It is raw, unfiltered essence of carnage. Murder, hatred, wrath, and the primal ecstasy of destruction fuels its insatiable hunger. Every drop of blood spilled, every murder committed, whether on the field of a grand war or in the shadows of a desperate betrayal, it feeds Khorne's endless appetite. No act of violence is too senseless, no atrocity too great. For Khorne, the purpose of life is simple: to kill or be killed. It scorns artistry or cruelty for its own sake. Pain belongs to its rival Slaanesh. To Khorne, there is only a brutal simplicity to a kill, and the relentless harvest of skulls. Khorne's followers are a reflection of this duality. Some are warriors of brutal honor, seeking glory in combat and testing their strength against the strongest foes. Others are berserkers, frenzied avatars of slaughter who revel in bloodshed for its own sake. To be devoted to Khorne is to abandon restraint, to give oneself wholly to the violent instinct that lies beneath the veneer of civilization. For in Khorne's eyes, all blood is sacred, no matter its source. Friend or foe, ally or enemy, it cares not, so long as the blood flows. The name Khorne is actually a bastardization of the demonic dark tongue Karnak, meaning Lord of Rage or Lord of Blood. Although there's still some speculation on this, some Khorne worshippers even believe that Khorne had a birth in the Warp, which was heralded by an age of unbridled warfare during Terra's second millennium. Its essence coalesced in the cries of the dying, the clash of steel, and the rivers of blood spilled during humanity's darkest conflicts. Since then, its hunger has grown, consuming entire worlds in the tides of war it inspires. Although, in the timeless existence of the Warp, this might only be something adopted by human followers when they discovered Khorne. To humans, the blood god looms as an apocalyptic colossus, a towering figure of brass and fury, his form swollen with unbridled power and primal hatred. Khorne is often envisioned as a monstrous humanoid, his broad, muscular frame rising hundreds of feet tall, a living mountain of sinew and rage. His visage, a snarling beast maw, evokes the unrestrained savagery of a warhound gone mad, though the true horror of his face lies shrouded beneath the ornate Baroque helm. Though his followers call him he, Khorne is beyond mortal concepts of gender, a being formed purely from the psychic echoes of endless war and slaughter. His body, exaggerated to a grotesque parody of martial perfection, is encased in overlapping plates of brass and blackened iron, each etched with the screams of the slain and hammered into being by unthinkable violence. Every movement of his immense frame resonates with the grinding of tortured metal, and every word he speaks is a guttural growl of bloodlust that reverberates across the warp like an unending war cry. His roar echoes through the infinite desolation of his domain, stoking the fires of carnage in every corner of the galaxy. And now that we have an understanding of what Khorne is to humanity, let's talk about what it would be like in a theoretical scenario where Khorne invades the galaxy. At no point in the 40K universe has there been a time when a Chaos God has fully materialized into real space. Although warp rifts tear the fabric of reality and allow smaller representations of the Chaos Gods into real space, these demons are but a fraction of the true power and glory of the Chaos Gods. The ruinous powers of chaos instead inhabit the realm known as the Warp, or the Immaterium. As real space is a dimension of the physical, warp space is a dimension of the etheric. To the few humans with the power to gaze into the Warp, it is a life-changing experience. Most of these accounts describe the Immaterium as hell itself, a landscape of pure insanity, where the very laws our bodies were evolved to perceive mean nothing. As such, the gods that reign over this hellish landscape are just as mind-bending and inconceivable. However, there have been a few doomed souls that have attempted to describe the Chaos Gods as best they can. These psyker mystics and astral seers give descriptions that come the closest to a human interpretation of what the Chaos Gods are. By using this esoteric and heretical writings of these rare individuals, one can get a brief explanation of what it would be like for a Chaos God to enter the material realm. Of the four major Chaos Gods worshipped by the trader, Khorne, the god of blood, is the easiest to interpret. If the god of rage would leave his throne of skulls and enter the material realm, his arrival would send shockwaves of pure destruction across the galaxy. Based on Kornite invasions of the past, it could be assumed that the summoning rituals that would have to take place in order to call the god of war into real space would be just as devastating as the god's arrival. Entire planetary systems, quite possibly entire sectors or segmentums, would have to participate in some form of massive blood ritual. For the servants of Khorne to accomplish this, the blood of every single living thing on a planet would have to be spilled in an orgy of bloodletting. Both the life of the innocent and the devout would have to be sacrificed to appease the blood god. Ocean worlds would turn red. Hive cities would be flooded with cascading blood from the top of the spire to the underhive. Rituals this sadistic and gruesome cannot be completed by the worshippers of Khorne alone. Imperial crusades or orc walls would have to be organized in order to accomplish such destruction. Imperial savants understand that the enemy within often plots in the shadows of the Imperial Adepta. An Inquisitor, a High Admiral, or an Astartes Chapter Master would most likely be used as a pawn for a ritual like this. Once the Imperial forces are fully committed to the destruction, it would be too late for High Command to stop the carnage. Another possible contender is the Orc race, which as a whole feeds into the god of war. Kornite worshippers could easily manipulate the Orcs' desire to create never-ending war across their many domains, and give the Greenskins a proper enemy, and thus ensuring that the bloodshed would be never-ending. That is why some in the Ordo Malleus suspect the actions of Inquisitor Cryptman that sent the Tyranids against the Orcs in the Octavius sector with extreme suspicion. The two unstoppable forces seem to wage a war with no end in sight, but one that feeds the bloodlust of Khorne. Whatever ritual is conducted, the Blood God's first action in the material realm is to slaughter the worshipper and enemy alike. Much like the birth of Slaanesh, which consumed the life of the Eldari that brought it into being, the ones responsible for Khorne's arrival would become instant additions to his throne of skulls. Whether the Blood God uses the Eye of Terror, the Cicatrice Maledictum, the Webway portal on Terra, or creates a portal all on his own, the area around his appearance would be turned into a twisted reflection of his realm in the warp. Patterns of 8 will manifest all throughout Khorne's new realm. Subsectors will be reduced to only 8 major stars. Planets will be terraformed to fit the Lord of Skull's desires, and molten brass will erupt from the core of gas giants. The entire galaxy will be reshaped at the dawn of Khorne's arrival. Demonic beasts would stalk the planets consumed by Khorne's wrath. Bloodletters would butcher any and all mortals that somehow survived the first wave of destruction. Some planets would be reduced to ash wastes that are littered with the skeletal remains of their inhabitants. Other planets would be engulfed in eternal flames that rival the heat of the stars. On the outskirts of Khorne's new domain in the material realm, packs of bloodhounds would hunt endlessly. Kornite berserkers would butcher their way from planet to planet, turning each new world into a ball of death for their patron god. Khorne would also give rise to enormous monuments of brass, some as large as hive cities. These testaments to Khorne's might would act as conduits of the blood god's rage, driving his legions into a killing frenzy, and acting as massive talismans that nullify the sorcerous powers of others. Much like the collars of Khorne used by his minions, these brass monuments would form a girdle around Khorne's ever-expanding territories. They would absorb the energies of the warp that exist in real space, fortifying his new empire against psychic attacks. Similar to how the pylons of Cadia once held the Eye of Terror in check, the brass monuments would weaken and push back the sorcerous powers of any chaos god that attempts to usurp Khorne's empire in real space. Another one of the mighty blood god's first actions would most likely be a tremendous roar that sends shockwaves far beyond the galaxy, quite possibly cutting through the great void. A roar of challenge, Khorne's new kingdom in real space, would welcome any race, faction, or army that believes it could stop Khorne's legion's advance. Every single warring faction, from the Tau Empire to the invading Hive fleets, would have to stop and acknowledge the might of the blood god. Without hesitation, Khorne would send out his legion to butcher anyone unwilling to meet his challenge, for the God of Skulls has no respect for those too weak to meet him in battle. A quick and gruesome death awaits all those who will be trampled by Khorne's might. In a way, this saves the majority of sentient life in real space from the pain and agony of this invasion. Khorne detests suffering, and if one of his demons or followers is not strong enough to end the life in one fell swoop, then he deserves the same type of dishonorable death as the life that he let suffer. Khorne's goal has always been to give rise to as much rage as possible. As such, his legions will strive to best their opponent in battle, regardless of the method of warfare. Khorne's generals are not mindless murderers. Their cunning is honed for a very specific purpose, to evoke endless slaughter. The Tau Empire's spheres of expansion will mean nothing, as the Empire is slowly divided by Khorne's legions until only a few Sept worlds remain. The Imperium will finally meet their punishment for relying on wars of attrition, as their soldiers die as soon as they hit the battlefield. Aldari craftworlds will be hunted down by the warpacks of demons and berserkers until the webway is breached and the tunneled highway is flooded with the blood of their people. The Great Devourer will howl and rage as his bioforms are expanded in huge numbers, but no biomass can be collected. The dynasties of the Necrons will be forced to fight an endless war or leave the galaxy altogether. And finally, the Orcs. The Orcs are actually going to have a really good time if Khorne ever invades the galaxy, so good for them. At the center of all of this carnage will be the physical representation of Khorne, a towering god clad in a full suit of armor decorated with millions of skulls. In his grip will be a massive sword, the end of all things. With every sweep of this gargantuan otherworldly weapon, reality itself will be torn. His minions will pour out on torrents of blood as each gouge becomes a warp rift and reality begins to disappear. In this way, Khorne collapses the weak veil of reality and allows the chaos of the warp to consume real space. Now that we have this theoretical invasion of Khorne within real space, let's take a look at some of the concrete lore on Khorne, starting with everybody's favorite, his warbands. Chaos Space Marine warbands dedicated to Khorne are the worst military force to encounter if you are part of the Imperium of Man. At least with the other factions, there's a possibility of switching sides. If it's a Plague Marine warband, you could accept Nurgle and become a grotesquely happy individual for the rest of your life. If it's Slaanesh, you take a bump of that good dope, grow a new set of boobs, and then seek perfection in all of its forms. Even the worst case scenario with Tzeentch, you just get turned into a chaos spawn. But with Khorne, if you decide to join a Berserker warband, you still get your ass beat, because that's what Khorne is all about, fighting. Let's start with the Kornite warband known as the Ravagers, which was first observed by Imperial forces engaging in hit-and-run raids on the Tau colony world of Salamine, located in the Segmentum Ultima. It was adjacent to the Damocles Gulf. They were notorious for attacking Imperial convoys within the Salamine system until the warband was unexpectedly caught between the Imperial Navy fleet and a Tau colony world. Sustaining heavy casualties, the Ravagers somehow managed to make good of their escape into the warp towards the projected destination of the world of Adumbrai. After arriving in system, the Ravagers sustained further losses to their fleet from the Imperial Navy flotilla that had stationed itself in orbit, but several of their forces still managed to make planetfall. The Ravagers attacked several different sites on the planet, but were repelled by a combined Imperial Guard force composed of Talaran Desert Raiders and Valhallan Ice Warrior regiments, led by the Imperial hero Commissar Caiaphas Cain. The Imperial forces soon came to realize that they had been caught between two rival factions of the Forces of Chaos. The Ravagers were actually on the Imperial world in order to disrupt the Slaaneshi cult from summoning a greater demon from the warp and turning the Imperial planet into a demon world. The Ravagers were only attacking apparent ritual sites in order to disrupt the cult from achieving their dark goals. The Imperial forces were able to determine where the final cult ritual was to be held and immediately deployed their troops in order to halt it. The Ravagers had also figured out the location of this ritual and teleported a large force of Kornite berserkers into the same area to slay the servants of the Prince of Chaos. Attacking simultaneously, the Valhallans led by Commissar Cain managed to follow the attacking Chaos Space Marine forces as they smashed their way through the cult's inadequate defenses. Unfortunately, they were unable to halt the ritual from reaching fruition, and the Slaaneshi cult summoned the greater demon, Emily Dubois. Somehow, Cain managed to defeat the demon after shooting her in the head with a las pistol, banishing her corrupted spirit back into the warp. The Commissar then called an artillery barrage to obliterate the location of the ritual, and the remaining Chaos faction was completely destroyed. It is believed that the rest of the Ravagers' Chaos Space Marines that were scattered across the planet were defeated by the Imperium's military forces. One of the deadliest heretical Astarte warbands that haunts the Imperium and the Segmentum Pacificus is known as the Tenebrae. They are notorious for launching raids from their unknown lair in the Veiled region. Amongst the dense nebulae, and alongside discarded stellar matter, the Tenebrae wait for foolhardy rogue traders, or hopeful colonists that attempt to tame this unmapped region of space. The origin of this Chaos warband is a complete mystery to the few Imperial savants with knowledge of their existence. The few gathered scraps of data point to the warband falling to Chaos Undivided in the few centuries following the end of the Horus Heresy. Their ancient and tattered war gear shows extreme signs of damage, and a peculiar dust purple seems to be their old livery. They also have no visible iconography, making their Legion badge a complete mystery. Their warband name is actually the ancient Terran Latin word for darkness, which might represent the veiled region of space where these heretics found safety after Horus's defeat on Terra and the retribution enacted by the Loyalist legions. However, some inquisitors with knowledge of the region's history point to the ancient and still practiced ceremony by the same name. The Tenebrae Rite, or practice, was a ceremonial mass performed a couple of days before the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. This ancient rite was created by the Emperor-worshipping cults that formed after the heresy, and eventually became part of the Adeptus Ministorum. It has been noted that a few Space Marine chapters that were sent to defend the Imperial border to the Veil region eventually grew to worship the God Emperor of mankind, and adopted many of the religious practices of the people. It is believed that the Tenebrae might have betrayed the Imperium, and as an act of blasphemy to the Emperor, taken on the name of the ancient rite that venerated the Emperor's sacrifice. The truth might never be known, however. What is known is a long history of violence towards the Imperium. The earliest surviving records point to the infamous Hour of Shadow, which plunged the hive world of Loran Alpha into murder and madness in the 33rd millennium, and whose anniversary is still marked by sorrowful mournings 7 millennia later. These records, which are culled from the archives of the Blackwing Space Marine chapter, speak of the Tenebrae invading the Hive planet and slaughtering untold millions as they pillaged the world for resources and slaves. When the Loyalist Black Legion arrived, the Tenebrae fought a retreating battle and were chased by the Space Marines. The warband managed to make it to the Veiled region, where the Imperial pursuers went missing. 3 standard centuries later, a single damaged Blackwing strike cruiser returned bearing only a handful of survivors. It was recorded that the chapter master of the Blackwings was slain during this conflict. Although the warband was already hated and reviled before the atrocity, the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition and the Blackwing chapter have sworn an oath of vendetta against the Tenebrae. Records of the Tenebrae renegade warband wouldn't exist until the early 41st millennium, in the event known as the Death of the Witch Moon, when the forged moon of Kazaya in the strategically vital Agathon system fell into an unnatural eclipse when its population was driven to murder and madness in an endless night of horror. The dreaded forces of the Tenebrae and the Company of Misery reigned as dark kings amidst the nightmare, and the baleful light of the Witch Moon spread calamity and warp-tainted phenomena wherever it fell, threatening the entire star system. The first Imperial attacks by the Astra Militarum took the form of squadrons from Battlefleet Ultima and the Inquisition, but they were hurled back in tatters by the madness of the Black Light and the warp-fueled savagery of their defenders. It is only when the unexpected arrival of the Cardinal Guard chapter, accompanied by a sacred band of the Adeptus Sororitas Order of the Black Sepulchre, bearing the holy relic known as the Book of Tears, were able to prevent the loss of tens of billions of lives on Agathon Prime. The Cardinal Guard was able to lead a fresh assault as further Adeptus Astartes forces, including the Iron Hands and the Stormlords, as well as the Adeptus Mechanicus reinforcements arrived. They were able to fight a brutal battle of tank and gunship clashes across the soaring metal canyons which creased the moon's surface, and chamber by chamber Zone Mortalis actions to purge the moon of the shadow that had befallen it. The traitor Marines inflicted fearful losses on their besiegers before they were driven back to the deep darkness of the warp. In the wake of this retreat, all life was purged from the moon before it was given back to the hands of the machine cult for tech exorcisms and eventual reclamation. The Tenebrae appear again and again scattered throughout history at the Luxor Drift Genocide, the Fall of Yun, the Plague of Madness, and the Karthath Iconoclasm, right up to their most recent sighting during the Orpheus Crisis. They always appear during times of terror and discord. Always, their presence is a herald of suffering and the nightmarish distortion of reality as a wave of suicidal despair and insanity going before them like a baleful shadow. Where they go, light is consumed by darkness, a darkness which hungers for life and whispers blasphemies to eat at the sanity of most righteous men. So insidious is their attack upon the will and the soul, that when the Tenebrae attack in full force, for theirs is a full panoply of war, including many ancient relics of battle and demon-tainted engines, that little resistance can be offered against the onslaught, as fortress worlds and bastions thought secure against the might of the armies fall in mere hours to the dark butchery. Another unique quality of the Tenebrae is the Fellblade tanks in their arsenal. These ancient patterned super heavy battle tanks used to be a common weapon for the Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade, but the standard template construct design has since been long lost. What makes the Fellblade so dangerous is their armament. They are equipped with a panoply of weapons, all but unknown in the 42nd millennia. The tank's primary weapon is a turret-mounted twin-linked accelerator cannon, a vacuum-based system that uses a complex overpressure mechanism to propel heavy shells with greater force than would be possible with a conventional cannon. So effective is this system that very little recoil is produced, making the weapon extremely accurate and stable. These once holy and venerated engines of war are now twisted and corrupted by the forces of chaos. So powerful are these weapons that a single tank could take down an Imperial Titan. When the Tenebrae attack, an eerie hush descends over the battlefield. Carrion birds cease their calling, and chittering insects fall silent. In this void of sound, soldiers can hear their own heartbeat, their blood pulsing faster as fear sinks its cold talons into their souls. As a soldier prepares for battle, he sees something move at the corner of his vision, but it is gone by the time he turns his head. Another hears a sound so otherworldly that she cannot be sure her mind is not playing tricks on her. Then a pair of glowing eyes peer out from the battlefield to look hungrily at its prey. More than any other Chaos Warband, the Tenebrae use the void of space as a weapon. They seldom clash with an enemy that can match them in battle, instead only picking at the weak points of the opposing force. And they have become masters at drawing out their enemy and leading them into uncharted space. There the Tenebrae allow precision strikes and terror to whittle away at the enemy. They simply wait patiently for the right moment when they can finish off what remains of the foe. The Tenebrae seem to have an instinctual understanding of the void. They know the locations of countless hideouts within the spiraling nebulas and dust clouds of the Veiled region. By allowing the enemy to give chase through their domain, they disorient their foe and render them defenseless, even when their military might is far greater than their own. This mastery of the void has also made the warband guides for the other Chaos forces. Other warlords and Chaos sorcerers present gruesome offerings to the warband in exchange for safe and speedy passages through the void. To the Tenebrae, there is no boundary that cannot be broken, and no route too chaotic that should be ignored. Their realm is darkness, and darkness is their home. Amongst the hundreds of Chaos Space Marine warbands, none are as savage or as bloodthirsty as the Butcher Horde. No sort of negotiation can save a world from the clutches of this frenzied band of Kornite berserkers. Their appearance is a guaranteed war of attrition that will only end after every river runs red with blood and the entrails of the populace cover the streets. Surprisingly, the warband is led by one of the most sadistic Chaos Space Marines, Khorne the Betrayer. The band came together during the invasion of the Diamor system. Multiple coalitions of the once proud World Eater Trader legions were rallied together by the schemes of Abaddon the Despoiler. The Chaos forces were confronted by the valiant Blood Angels chapter, and seeking to collect the head of the most worthy son of Sanguinius, Khorne the Betrayer separated from the rest of the invasion force and assaulted the planet of Amathal. Khorne's intentions weren't to forge a vast army of conquest to aid him in this quest. In his mind, all those who needed others to fight in their battles were weaklings and undeserving of victory. The truth was that the Betrayer's brutal deeds and legend had spread through the ranks of the Chaos forces like ripples upon the surface of a blood pool. So spectacular was the carnage that he created, so monstrous the butchery of his passing, that Khorne's faithful were drawn in his wake. At first Khorne fought alone, then at the head of a warband of Kornite berserkers. The slaughter that they caused on the planet weakened the barrier between the immaterium and the material realm so much that the Blood Angels were forced to call for aid from the demon-hunting Grey Knight's chapter. After slaughtering his way across the sundered reach, the Betrayer had found himself the master of a murderous army. By the time he had exterminated all life on the Pandora colonies, a whole fleet of spike-prowled warships were in his command. Their holds crammed with maniacs, murderers, and hellish war engines. This was not power that Khorne had sought, but neither did he cast it aside. Like any true servant of Khorne, the Betrayer knew a deadly weapon when he saw one. If it was the Blood God's will that he wield this mighty implement of death, then who was he to question it? And this is how the Butcher Horde came to be. A terrifying engine of war. Great masses of Kornite berserkers formed its thundering heart, the warriors from dozens of distant warbands drawn together in the name of unholy murder. Only the overriding will of the Betrayer kept these psychotic hordes from killing each other. And even then, berserker blood was still spilled every single day. Khorne cared nothing for the lives of his followers, and so did nothing to intercede. So long as they were strong enough to murder the enemy, it mattered nothing to him if the weak were weeded out by the strong in the meantime. Every warrior slain was just another skull for the Skull Throne. Though the berserkers of Khorne's horde followed him as an avatar of the Blood God's will, many amongst their ranks saw him as both a hated rival and the ultimate skull to claim in order to win Khorne's favor. Such was the way for the blood god's servants. It was a rare day that the berserker did not have to strike down a handful of his own followers as a result of their frenzied attempts on his life. Many more servants of the blood god followed in Khorne's wake, lending their strength in numbers to the butcher horde. Seething masses of chaos cultists screamed praise to Khorne as they followed their demigod of slaughter into battle. Demon princes led their own bands of followers to warn the betrayer's name, bringing with them rumbling battle tanks and deranged hellbrutes that lent the horde heavy firepower. Most terrifying of all were the massed demon engines of the butcher horde. Amongst the packs of prowling mauler fiends and defilers towered super-heavy abominations such as the scuttling brass scorpions and the Lord of Skulls. Driven by the caged fury of Khorne's most powerful demons, these engines of annihilation were nearly as deadly as the betrayer himself. After amassing such an impressive army, Khorne launched a campaign known as the Blood Torrent War against the factorums of the imperial world of Ulsa. During the conflict, his mighty chain axe, Gorechild, became jammed in the hull of an Adeptus Mechanicus war machine, and his plasma pistol fractured from overuse. The betrayer turned the sharp edges and hard surfaces of the factorum to his own violent ends, impaling screaming Imperial guardsmen on grinding gears, or flaying the skins from their faces by pressing them on howling conveyors. Such was the carnage that the enormous manufactorum ground to a halt, its workings clogged with the mangled remains of over 1,000 pulverized corpses. The most current conflict the Butcher Horde has been a part of was the invasion of Tazdrak, where the Alpha Legion faced competition from Khorne and his army, who were attempting to slaughter the Psyker, providing a beacon of hope for the surrounding region during the Great Night. When a contingent of the Imperial Fist Astartes arrived on the planet to aid the beleaguered defenders, Saint Celestine also appeared from the warp to aid during this crucial fight against the Butcher Horde. She secured the Psyker and valiantly faced Khorne the Betrayer, but was defeated and slain by the vicious Kornite Berserker in battle. The Butcher Horde has become so large that it has absorbed many of the other Kornite Berserker warbands, such as the Wrathful Dead, the Sons of Slaughter, the Oblivion Butchers, the Life Slayers, Forge of Hate, the Endless Murder, Bloody Path, the Black Feasts, and Angron's Fury. The only other Kornite warband that has remained autonomous from the Butcher Horde is the Eights Guard. The Chaos Space Marine warband known as the Eights Guard is a fanatically unhinged Kornite demonkin group that believes itself to be the only true disciples of the Blood God. This claim is reinforced by the warband's sadistic and violent history. Like most Kornite berserkers, the Eights Guard doesn't know or even care about their origins. They would much rather shout about their gory achievements while hacking away at whoever is unlucky enough to be in front of them. The name of the warband derives from the rituals each member must undertake in order to be inducted into the group. Each traitor must prove their battle prowess during 8 battles. A Bloodthirster of the 3rd rank, named Gakarax, sits ever in judgment of the worshippers of Khorne. If he approves of a warrior's efforts, then at the battle's end, he reaches through the veil to carve a vivid scar in the warrior's flesh. One by one, these bloody wounds form runes of Khorne, marking the warrior as worthy to fight alongside the demon's cohort. Should an aspirant ever fail to earn his scar, he would gladly fall upon his own roaring chainblade as an act of penance. The sheer zealotry of the Eights Guard draws many Kornite berserkers to their banner, for this level of fanaticism echoes their own. Their devotion is so strong, they can draw Gakarax followers through the veil with ease, and have fought in the demigod's shadow on many occasions. For example, on the planet of Skardafel, while the White Scar's 3rd Company fought a guerrilla war with the war hosts of Craftworld Ulthwé, into the conflict plunged the Kornite demonkins of the Eights Guard. Among the Fire Swamps, the warband brought forth half of their chosen demons in a single day, the Khorne worshippers slaughtered with abandon. Many years later, the Eights Guard fought alongside the Wrath upon the Tau colony world of Shaunash. The aliens fought bravely, deploying incredible technologies to blast great holes in the Kornite ranks, yet the Tau were still outnumbered, and despite their heroism, they were overrun. Crazed with battle lust, the two demonkin hosts then fell upon one another, battling in frenzy until both almost were wiped out. This warband has even been led by the Bloodthirster, Gakarax himself, leading the Eights Guards and the Skullsworn against the Imperial Fortress world of Elmarid. The demonkin faced elements of the Imperial Fist and the Raven Guard, reinforced by several regiments of Tempestus Scions. The war was long and bloody, but one by one the demonkin reconsecrated the planet's furnace temples in bloody ceremonies of ritual sacrifice. As the last shrine fell, Elmarid was dragged whole into the warp, claimed by Khorne as a new demon world. In this deep dive, let's continue to explore Khorne through his demons as we get into Khorne Fleshhounds and Karnak. The flesh hounds of Khorne are the demonic manifestations of the blood god's single-minded desire to hunt down and eviscerate anything that moves. The god of war created these bloody-minded beasts from his own essence, and now they act as his own personal bounty hunters, stalking the enemies of the chaos god of murder. Though most people that have seen these beasts have suffered a grotesque end, as their entrails are ripped out of their stomachs and their flesh scraped off the bone. The few Imperial savants that have managed to write down the eyewitness testimony of these blood-curdling creatures describes them as bestial demons that resemble a nightmarish wolf-reptile hybrid with thick, scaled hides that even an Imperial guardsman's bayonet struggles to pierce. The demon's muscular jaws make up the majority of their massive heads. Two beady little eyes rest on top of the blunt maw, full of sharp, shredding teeth. Those that have seen inside the creature's mouth are haunted by the decaying human parts that are lodged in between the teeth, what they describe as hopefully being small xenoskulls, or human flesh-covered limbs dangling out of the demon's disgusting mouth. These creatures are portrayed as muscle-bound, four-legged juggernauts that can tip over an Imperial vehicle with a well-timed charge. So brawny are these demons that their steps make crushing footprints even on ferrocrete surfaces. Various accounts differ on the coloration of their scales. Most describe them as being dark red, with often black patterns, ubiquitous with the color schemes of the many demons of the blood god Khorne. But other depictions show these creatures as being violet, black, or sometimes even white, as a means to better display its victim's bloodstains streaking through the demon's body. Various horns protrude from the demon's skulls. Often the smaller ones sprout from the snout and get larger until they reach the back of the cranium, where they are massive and dangerously sharp. Some testimony describes webbing in between the larger horns. This thin and often ripped cartilage can fan out based on the demon's roar. Imperial savants have not managed to pinpoint the purpose of these fan-like appendages, but some speculate that they act as sensors, reading the ebb and flows of the immaterium and tracking the demon's prey based on its psychic emanations in real space. Others speculate that it acts as a communication tool, making it easier to signal and coordinate assaults with other flesh hounds, and there are others still that simply believe these fans are there to strike fear into the enemy. While not all flesh hounds share these tools, every account of these demons have reported a series of spikes running down the spine of the four-legged monstrosity, often ending on a sinuous spiked tail that whips with incredible force as the creature stalks. All flesh hounds don the collar of Korn, the defining mark of the blood god's power over his demons. Hanging around the throat of the flesh hound is a large brass collar that seems fused to the creature's skin. Those that have laid eyes on this massive choker describe it as appearing painful to the wearer, but in reality, the collar protects the demon from psychic attacks, as it absorbs the warp energies before they can harm the wearer. This anti-psychic defense makes the flesh hounds the bane of all sorcerers, and because of this, there is not a single psyker in the galaxy who does not fear the hunting beasts of the blood god. When the blood god pleases, he spawns his gore-thirsty minions into his realm, and orders these beasts to the foot of his throne, where their collars are shackled, and they are unleashed by the thousands to the bone-littered plains of Khorne's territory. Inside the warp, they fight amongst each other, slaughtering their kin, and forging pacts based on their savagery. Only the most violent survive these first few hours, and once their bloodthirsty throngs have been established, they storm through the realm, spreading bloodshed amongst the demon-filled battlefields of Khorne's domain. Flesh hounds are found everywhere, stalking demons of stone and magma on the volcanic peaks at the edge of Khorne's territory, to chasing away juggernauts that come to drink from the river of blood that flows with liquid rage. The hounds of Khorne hone in on their hunting skills, and eventually their god orders them back into his brass fortress, where they patrol the skull yard inside the citadel's walls, sniffing out the blood scent of any who would dare attempt to break in. The war god uses his flesh hounds as a sharpening tool, making sure his legions are always ready for violence. When he deems it necessary, he hides a demon sword, known as Korthoth, the Blood Hunger, inside one of his flesh hounds, and allows his armies to hunt down the demon and claim the weapon, which is capable of cutting not only through matter, but also time. The demons and followers of Khorne slaughter each other as they attempt to capture the flesh hounds, All the while, the creatures butcher any demon that approaches them. The demon, brave, strong, or fortunate enough to slay the fleshhound containing the demon sword, becomes the lord of the slaughter, and may wield the blood hunger. For a day or an age, as Khorne sees it fit, the lord of the slaughter enjoys great privilege in battle. When Khorne wearies of his lord of slaughter's exploits, the blood god begins the tournament again. A fleshhound devours both wielder and the sword, combining their essence, and the demons battle again until Khorne finds a new lord of the slaughter. When not strengthening Khorne's legions or protecting Khorne's territory, the blood god unleashes his fleshhounds to hunt his enemies, whether they be mortals or demons. Incursions into other Chaos God's territories are a common task for the hounds of the blood god. Tearing through demonic etheric matter is almost as pleasing to these creatures as mortal flesh. To a fleshhound, very few things are as satisfying as dismembering a demonette, or flaying any other demon of the Chaos God Slaanesh, the nemesis of Khorne. When ordered to hunt down prey in real space, a fleshhound is given the scent of the blood of some doomed soul, and then let loose, ordered to bring the mortal skull back to his master. Fleshhounds are relentless when on the hunt, and even pursue their target across vast interstellar distances. Constantly closing in, their howling often drives their target to madness before the hound's own razor-sharp teeth sink into the flesh. While patient enough as trackers, hounds tend to give in to their inherent bloodlust when prey is finally sighted. With bone-chilling howls, they rush forward, crossing open ground with astonishing speed. Leaping at the last moment, the hounds attempt to physically overpower their targets, savaging them with teeth and claw. Large or particularly well-armored foes, like vehicles, are encircled, with individual hounds darting in from different directions, warring at their target until it finally falls from exhaustion or the vehicle is disabled and unable to move. Once the foe is down, the hounds rush in mass for the final kill. Hounds normally hunt in packs, and only the most well-armed and disciplined can hope to face such an assault and survive. Those marked as quarry for the fleshhound are doomed to run to ground and be torn to shreds by their red, dripping fangs. Faultless trackers and merciless in their chase, only a few ever live to recount their gory pursuit. With their prey slain, the fleshhounds growl and snap at each other as they compete for cuts of meat. Once stripped of flesh, the choicest bones are then carried back and buried amidst the huge collection of diverse skulls that fill their master's brass citadel. In the realm of Khorne, the fleshhounds are a threat to all creatures. Even greater demons must tread wary when out on the plains of powdered bone, for in their domain the fleshhounds are territorial and pounce on intruders in ravenous packs, hundreds strong. Fleshhounds are led by the largest and most vicious of their kind, invariably a slavering beast of pure aggression that has survived centuries of challenges for supremacy in the pack. It is common to find fleshhounds fighting in the demonic blood legions of Khorne. Some are incorporated as fast-flanking units, vanguards sent to probe enemy lines, or savage vulnerable targets. The cohorts of the Exhaustion Legions are filled with fleshhound packs, directed by the Heralds of Khorne to hunt down specific targets or swarm an enemy position. The most powerful and well-known fleshhound is the three-headed Hound of Vengeance known as Karnak. For those that experience the wrath of Khorne, mortal and demon alike, there is but one fate. Those who insult the raging god's pride, warriors that break Khorne's creed, cowards that refuse to shed blood. Khorne's anger reaches them all. From one end of the galaxy to the other, across space and time, Karnak is the incarnation of Khorne's vengeance. Relentless, vicious, and single-minded, Karnak hunts his prey across the warped demon realms, through the depths of space, across swirling gas clouds and blazing supernovas. No army can defend against him, no wall can bar his path. When not hunting, Karnak prowls the shadows of the blood god's throne room. Karnak is ever vigilant, for he has 3 heads, and while one feeds on the bones of Khorne's sacrifices, the other 2 keep watch. None pass into Khorne's throne chambers, except with the leave of this watchful guardian. Sometimes an unwary bloodletter strays too close, and Karnak pounces. It is a brutal end, signaled by the snap of a vertebrae, a splattering of blood, and the chorus of chilling snarls. As Khorne's anger rises, Karnak ceases his feeding and lopes to his master's side. With a roar, Khorne unleashes Karnak. The great hound of Khorne lifts his 3 heads, nostrils flaring as he catches the scent of his prey. He paces to and fro, growling and snarling as each head, in turn, savors the portion of the scent. Each head can trace Karnak's quarry in a different fashion. The first head follows the trails through space. The second tracks the scent through time. And the third head, the most dangerous, senses the quarry through his thoughts, scenting their innermost feelings through dreamscapes and delusions. The third head guarantees that no prey eludes Karnak. Those with wit and skill can avoid temporal detection, but no man can outrun his own mind. Once Karnak has fixed upon the odor of his victim, the Hound of Vengeance lopes forth on his hunt, gathering pace as the trail grows stronger. Karnak bounds from realm to realm, flashing across insubstantial landscapes of nightmares, leaping from star to star. His growls echo in the dreams and the waking thoughts of his target, and his prey is overwhelmed by the foreshadow of approaching doom. Karnak's howl resounds across space and time, drawing other flesh hounds to the chase. As the pursuit covers leagues and light years, a pack of slavering beasts form around Karnak, hungry for the kill. Their howls join the roar of their leader as they approach their prey. In a frenzy of fang and blood, Karnak and his demon pack strike, tearing through anything in their path. Their quarry is quickly cornered, and Karnak strikes, tearing hunks of flesh, eviscerating and dismembering with his metallic claws. In the end, with the flopping, shredded remains of their victim clasped tightly in all 3 jaws, Karnak hurtles back to Khorne's throne room to present his gift to his master. There, a pleased blood god invariably adds the skulls to the ever-growing pile upon which his throne sits. As befits Karnak's favored status, he has been gifted with a superior version of the brass collar worn by other flesh hounds. Possessed of Khorne's hatred for sorcery, this thick metal band withstands psychic powers as easily as his scaled skin repels rainwater. Karnak always remembers those psykers who dare cast their despised magic at him in battle. Though it may take years, the hound will inevitably have his vengeance, and once his prey has been killed, he will take great satisfaction in chewing up its sorcerer's bones. Let's continue exploring the demons of Khorne as we get into the Skull Taker. The Kornite demon, Uzul, is one of the most infamous bloodletters to have ever been encountered by the Imperium. It is said that when Khorne created Uzul, the first thing the demon did was decapitate a fellow bloodletter, thus pleasing the blood god immensely. So began an existence of decapitation that has spread terror throughout the realms of chaos and real space. After his bloody awakening, Uzul wandered the realms of the warp and reality in search of the mightiest foes against which to test his martial skills, and mortal or not, all warriors fell to his blade. When the bloodletter took his 888th skull, the demonic champion in the making was chosen by his god to enter the Skull Pit, the proving ground for all Kornite bloodletter champions. There, Uzul was not only unmatched, but he beheaded every one of his opponents without receiving so much as a scratch in return. In recognition of Uzul's achievement, Khorne not only anointed him as both a herald and his sacred executioner, but bestowed the singular title of Skull Taker. With this rank came warp energies that swelled his body, and as an extension of his form, his Hellblade also grew in power. Thus was formed the Slayer Sword, a formidable weapon capable of cutting through reinforced plasteel and destroying even the most monstrous of beasts with a single blow. In the midst of every battle, Skull Taker seeks out the mightiest foe on the battlefield so that he may slay them himself with his serrated Hellblade. A duelist beyond compare, Skull Taker weaves his blade in bloody crescents that dismember but rarely slay. Those who flee his confrontation are cut down without remorse, while those who stand their ground usually suffer the same fate, though at a slower and far more painful pace. Skull Taker likes to take his time with his foes, dismembering them limb from limb, yet not taking their life until the end to prolong its pleasure in the slaughter. Only when its opponent is a limbless horror upon the ground does it offer up death, grabbing their head, anointing the 8 words of sacrifice, while it uses warp flame to wreath the victim's head in hellfire,
burning away flesh and muscle until only a bare, charred skull remains. With a savage twist, he tears free the naked trophy, snapping it from the spine and holding it aloft for all to see. Skulltaker then places it within the grisly sack it carries, which contains all other skulls it has liberated from their owners during the battle. He butchers his way towards his next victim and proceeds to enact the same ritual over and over again, until no foe worthy of his undivided attention remains. Since his ascension, the champion of Khorne has carved a bloody path through the millennia. Skulltaker fought alongside the demon Primarch Angron on the world of Armageddon, cutting down several Grey Knight brother captains in his infinite wrath. On Agrippina VI, the Skulltaker slew the Orc warlord Grimsnack Uruk in a titanic duel that lasted a solar day and a night, the combatants wading through the multitude of corpses that the warlord's once unstoppable horde thought could stand against the demons. In another instance, a full score of Aldari exarchs fell to his blade, even their skill and experience falling short of the heralds. Indeed, every race in the galaxy has had a fearful legend concerning the Skulltaker and his horrific exploits. When he eventually returns to the Brass Citadel within the Realm of Chaos, Skulltaker presents his trophies to his master. Most of them Khorne takes for himself. They are impaled upon brass spikes that adorn his keep. A few of them, those belonging to warriors that offered their killer a real challenge before they fell, Khorne begrudgingly allows the greatest of his sacred executioners to keep. Skulltaker weaves these into a horrific cloak of skulls he wears using bloody sinews taken from the bodies of other victims to sit alongside his other great triumphs. Skulltaker often goes to war at the head of the cohort of blood, an assemblage of the greatest bloodletters selected from amongst the demonic legion's ranks. The herald's mere presence on the field of battle drives Khorne's lesser demons to impossible heights of frenzy, as the bloodletters regard him as the pinnacle of their kind, an exemplar of their bloodthirsty god's demands. Sometime during this reign of carnage, Skulltaker claimed a juggernaut demonic steed named Kul Tyran as his mount, which has helped him carve a bloody path through thousands of worlds. Kul Tyran was said to have been the toughest demonic mount in the Juggernaut stockade. The demon beast has killed more of his kin than any other before or since. He prowled the perimeters of the pens, regularly making bids for freedom. He once shattered the compound's wall, and would have escaped, were it not for a dozen heralds of Khorne who held him back. Skulltaker selected Kul Tyran from the pack when the sacred executioner witnessed the beast goring 3 heralds at once. Since then, the pair have regularly erupted from the warp to harvest a bounty of skulls for the blood god. They have dueled others on countless worlds in the mortal realm, never yet losing a challenge. While Skulltaker decapitates his foes with the Slayer sword, Kul Tyran tears into the armor as if it were soft flesh, and flesh as if it were ash. So pleased is Khorne with the pair's bloody work, that while in the Immaterium, Kul Tyran is the only juggernaut permitted to prowl the smoke-choked passageways of the blood god's brass citadel, as its reward for engaging in unbridled destruction.
No deep dive on Khorne could be complete without talking about his greater demons, the Bloodthirsters.
A Bloodthirster is a greater demon of the chaos god Khorne. He is the manifestation of the unreasoning rage and savagery of total war. Khorne takes the essence of brutality and fills these greater demons with power that comes from the raw and violent emotions of psychically sensitive beings in real space. Every blow ever struck, every life ever taken in anger, distilled into a single, towering form of iron and sinew. As the living embodiment of war, rage, and murder, Bloodthirsters represent the bloodiest side of warfare and are renowned as the greatest warriors amongst demonkind. Only the boldest and most heroic of mortal champions would ever stand the slimmest chance of survival in combat with a Bloodthirster, and even then, he has a small chance of victory. In appearance, these savage monsters resemble the stereotypical demons of ancient Terra. At over 30 feet tall, they tower over mortals. Their skin is a deep red of encrusted blood. Their gore-flecked hides are covered in crimson fur, the color of spilt blood, and their eyes are milky white without visible irises or pupils. Their feet are hooved, and the ground burns at their passing. Their bodies are impossibly muscular, covered in iron-tipped barbs. From their backs sprout gigantic bat-like wings, enabling them to soar over the battlefield before diving into the fiercest and bloodiest areas of battle, striking at will. Most hideous of all are their faces, which are bestial, almost canine, the visage of Khorne's most favored beings in the universe. Their snarling maws are filled with fangs the size of mortal swords. Bloodthirsters wear ancient, ornate armor, sections of which are adorned with the glowing skull of the mark of Khorne as a sign of his blessing. The iconography of his armor is usually bronze or iron black, upon which the glowing red runes of Khorne are proof against the most fearsome of psychic attacks, a fact that strikes utter horror into the hearts of the most accomplished of battle psychers. True to the Lord of Rage, a Bloodthirster's armor is also proof against the ranged weapons of any coward that would dare attempt to strike them down from a distance, rather than engaging them in righteous close combat. As well as their razor-sharp claws, the greater demons of Khorne are known to carry two primary weapons which epitomize murder. The first is a massive demonic battle axe, which is the iconic weapon of Khorne, forged in the heat of the rage of the Lord of War, and imbued with the essence of caged greater demons. The keen-edged blade is at least the height of a space marine, and it's haft several times longer. Perhaps the most powerful weapons ever created, these gigantic battle axes can cleave an armored battle tank in half. These weapons not only destroy the foe's physical body, but often consume their souls as well, as an offering to the blood god. The second weapon a Bloodthirster carries is a long, barbed whip, which is capable of dealing death from range. Since Bloodthirsters are obsessed with spreading death and destruction, the use of such a weapon enables them to strike down a distant foe with the shattering power of their deafening bellow. Though not as satisfying as cleaving apart a foe with a sweep of their axe, they do allow a Bloodthirster to reach and destroy even the fastest and most agile of their foes. But the Bloodthirsters of Khorne are not simple, mindless berserker engines of war. They are the generals and ultimate champions of the demonic legion of the blood god. Countless lesser demons march beneath them in unstoppable assaults against the enemies of their master and his chosen mortal servants. Bloodthirsters are the masters of every tactic that leads to spilling blood. They hate stealth and guile. They see it as a coward's way, and direct their forces towards the total defeat of their enemies with stunning brutality. Against such a combination of rage and leadership, none can stand. There are 8 distinct types of Bloodthirsters amongst the demonic legions of Khorne, but it would be a fatal error to believe that even the lowest ranked, the Bloodthirsters of the 8th host, are in some way lesser warriors than their kin, or that they possess a reduced threat. In truth, only those versed in demonic lore have any notion of the varied ranks of Bloodthirsters, for all of them seem equally terrifying and destructive to the mortals who feel their ire upon the battlefield. Nonetheless, each of the 8 ranks of Bloodthirsters possesses their own lethal skills, armaments, and titles. Those of the 8th host, for example, are known as Bloodthirsters of unfettered fury. They are the most numerous of the Lord of Skull's greater demons. In one fist, these colossal fiends carry a massive axe of Khorne, which they can carve battle tanks in two with. On the other hand, the Bloodthirster wields a vicious lash of Khorne, immense whips studded with brass spikes. These weapons slice through the air with a thunderous crack, breaking necks and entangling limbs, or driving on the bloodletters and fleshhounds around them. These monstrous beings are skilled generals, and are often seen commanding Khorne's demonic legions in attacks in real space. By comparison, those of the 6th rank, known as the Bloodthirsters of insensate rage, are the most mindlessly savage of their kind. The fires of Khorne's forge fill their chests, stoking their fury to a state that renders them utterly incoherent with anger. So great is their ire-fueled strength that these demons are able to heft immense brass axes as tall as a fortress gate, and the cohorts of Khorne are driven into a frenzy in the wake of their furnace-hot fury. The arrival of such an entity on the battlefield heralds the coming of the end. And the only other known rank within Imperial records is the infamous Bloodthirsters of the 3rd host, known as the Wrath of Khorne. Soaring through the skies on vast, leathery wings, Wrath of Khorne Bloodthirsters scour the battlefield for their prey. These arrogant huntsmen are charged by Khorne with a sacred duty, humbling the mightiest heroes of the foe and butchering them in the name of the Lord of Battle. Breathing jets of hellfire, wielding a blood flail and monstrous axe of Khorne, there is no greater champion of war. Looking through Imperial records, one of the most notable bloodthirsters to have been encountered by the Imperium was the Storm Prince, a bloodthirster trapped beneath the frozen surface of the world of Acheron, lost in the warp for centuries. When the Bloodraven Space Marines, the Eldar of Craftworld Biotan, and the Orcs, led by warbands, Gorgots, all came to Acheron in search of the legendary artifact known as the Spear of Cain, the use of the weapon awakened the demon. Only by combining their forces in an uneasy alliance were the three factions able to defeat the Storm Prince and prevent him from unleashing a rampage across the galaxy in the name of the Blood God. Another one of the most infamous bloodthirsters to have been encountered by the Imperium was Ka-Aksha, also called the Usurper. It is written that the Usurper is one of the most powerful warp entities ever spawned. Exactly what deeds earned this bloodthirster its name remains hidden to all but those truly steeped in the most forbidden of lore. Some whisper that having attained such power as to set itself apart from the Blood God, the Usurper attempted to turn against his master. Angered to such a degree by his betrayal that an entire demon world burned, Khorne is said to have imprisoned the bloodthirster within a mighty axe of warp-forged metal, which he cast out from the warp and into the cold, hard dimension of reality. The ancient and feared weapon, known as the Axe of Ka-Aksha, is spoken of in numerous texts known to the Hellseers of the Screaming Vortex, and also to the Inquisition's Ordo Hereticus. How many ambitious and brutal warlords have wielded the axe that serves as a prison for the bloodthirster cannot be said. Many of the Screaming Vortex's most infamous and bloodthirsty murderers have sought the axe, and a number have mastered it, for a brief time at least. In truth, all ultimately fall to the rage of the bloodthirster within, for mortals cannot harness such power without a price being exacted. The price is inevitably the soul of the bearer, a soul so blood-engorged that it makes the most satisfying of meals for the demon entrapped within the axe. This demon weapon is fabled across the length of the breadth of the glowing worlds. The axe is located on the planet of Messia, but as every true champion of the Blood God knows, such treasures are rarely to be claimed without a challenge. The axe is not lying around waiting to be picked up, but instead in the possession of one of the countless billions of bloated mutants that shambles across the surface of Messia's night side. How the mutant came in possession of the axe cannot be known, but when the tortured light of Messia's polluted sun falls upon the creature, it shall be transformed into a cunning and devious adversary, and at that very moment realize the true nature of the weapon clutched in its filth-encrusted claws. When that happens, the once lowly mutant will have in his possession the means of laying claim to an entire world, unless it is opposed by another servant of the Blood God.
And that completes our deep dive on Khorne. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We're probably going to do one for Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch, so subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk tomorrow. This is Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first, and then